Mark,
Teddy, how are you?
dude, thank you so much for jumping on
Yeah, absolutely.
and more than punctual.
Yeah. You got a lot of folks.
Yeah, and growing. We're doing a
Yeah.
little get together at Napa. So
Yeah.
just a bunch of young guns, next generation.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. I think Bob's going to be in Napa.
Yeah. Are you going to the Plan Advisor in Chicago early June?
I think Frank Coffee is going to probably go to that for us, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
We also have Denise Balbo up there. They're probably going to make the stop on that one for us
Nice.
for
I
sure.
may or may not go to the Chicago one, but
Yeah.
I I always try to go to Napa.
Yeah. Yeah. We always try to have somebody present. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I'm on the steering committee for that now, and
Yeah.
we blew past attendance for last year, and
Yeah.
last year was record breaking. So it's going to be another big one.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be, I think it's going to be, could be the biggest one they've ever had, to tell you the truth. From what I hear. But
I always feel like I afterwards I'll need one of those neck, like when you
I don't
strain
know.
your neck because you're always just like looking around, you
Yeah.
know.
It's,
Mason, Jim, Brennan, Nate,
hey.
Patrick. Hey guys, good
Good
morning.
morning.
Luke hasn't completely left us yet for the trading desk. Not happy about it, but I get
Too
it.
close.
Awesome. Well, I think we got a good group of people for now, so maybe we can kick off. I want to be respectful of your time, Mark, and thanks
Yeah.
for joining us. So I know, Luke, you couldn't join us for the last meeting, but we did leave off talking about TPAs and working with TPAs, or maybe more broadly, considerations for bundled versus unbundled. And Mark immediately jumped to mind. He's in the Dallas area here. I networked to him through one of our fintech partners, but Mark has a deep 20 plus year history in that space. Definitely knows a thing or two. I thought it'd be great to have Mark on uh, and really just open it up to any questions and conversation, and we'll see what comes out of it. But with that, Mark, again, thank you for joining us. If it's all right, I'd love for you to give a little bit about your background, a few thoughts you have on the TPA world, bundled, unbundled, and we'll just kick it off.
Yeah. No, thanks, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity. And it's always good to maybe kind of tell our story. But more importantly, like Bill said, I'm the national director of sales for MAP Retirement. We're a national third party administration firm covering the whole country. I'm located in Dallas Fort Worth. My experience is I've been in the, like Bill said, I've been in the qualified plan business for 20 plus years now. Um, really kind of half and half. I spent a large time in the record keeping business as a 401k wholesaler for a couple large record keepers that are in the business. Really transitioned over the TPA side about 8 or 9 years ago, and have been with a couple of national firms through that journey. So I really got a chance to see both sides of the equation when it comes to record keeping administration in our business. Um, when I came to MAP, I got the fortunate opportunity to work for a guy that's been in the business, and a guy you guys may have heard the name before, Bob Carroll. Bob Carroll ran the John Hancock business, record keeping and sales distribution business for over 25 years. And then he went to run the Mass Mutual business before it got sold to Empower. But about the same time that I came to MAP, he was building out the firm organically and inorganically through acquisitions and through building a sales team, and he needs some help doing that. So I came over to help him with that. And I think, through your conversations about bundled versus unbundled, from a TPA standpoint, it is bundled has always been kind of our enemy. But I think there's some things that are changing in that environment today. I think a number of advisors like yourself have recognized the value that a TPA brings. I'll tell you that just from a statistic standpoint, overall nationally, when a TPA is brought into initial conversations with an advisor, the closing on that plan typically goes up to about 70 to 75% in a lot of cases. And I think it's a large part because we bring a lot of expertise from a plan design, and that's what a lot of plan sponsors are looking for these days. And certainly it's changed with some of the unique plan designs that we're seeing out in the marketplace today. But the capabilities of the TPA world have changed as well. The bundle providers obviously are trying to be the big gorillas in the room, and they continue to expand their distribution capabilities outside of the TPA environment through multiple channels and avenues, as you guys already know, whether it be through the inclusion of wealth management services, through ancillary services that we're seeing evolve in the retirement plan space, be it ESAs or student loan repayment capabilities, all this kind of trying to get their reach on those dollars as best as they can. When it boils down to it, the things that move plans in our business today are, at least from a TPA's perspective, is price is still pretty much at the top of the list. But I will tell you that plan design is really neck and neck with it up there as far as what you can do to help a plan sponsor get to the ultimate goal. And that is, what can you do to help my participants, and how can you help me save more from a tax deductibility standpoint? So we take all those things into consideration when we're talking to a plan sponsor, and really go through an in-depth plan design. MAP Retirement has really stuck to maybe what I like to refer to as the archaic model of a TPA. We still offer a really kind of a hand-on-hand approach when it comes to plan design, because we know at the end of the day, this is like the 565th most important thing to do on the plan sponsor's list, right? And a retirement plan is, they want something that's simple, that they don't have to understand. They don't have to be a brain surgeon to run it on an annual basis. And so we want to make that as efficient and as simple as possible for them, because at the end of the day, that's 98% of our clients that we're talking to, right? What we have seen in the bundled space is with COVID pandemic, there was a lot of turnover in the bundled record keeping space. We saw a number of experienced folks either move out of the industry or move on to different specialties in the industry, and those bundled record keepers have had some trouble backfilling those spots. The 18 to 20-year-old experienced plan consultant is being backfilled with, say, a 3 to 5 year experienced person. And not only are the plan sponsors experience change from having to talk to a new person, they're also experiencing a very decreased experience level. So the service models have been hurt by that on the bundled side, and it's allowed us to pick up business because of that, because we were running our MAP as well as a number of TPAs were kind of front running that and backfilling our spots if we had people leave into those plan consultant roles that are on that day-to-day basis conversation with the sponsor. So we've seen the service models on the bundle side suffer a little bit. Like I said, we picked up some business because of it. The other thing that is pretty unique in the TPA world is, the offering of some of these ancillary services. As a TPA, we offer 316 administration services, where if a sponsor wants me to pick a plan up and they don't ever want to touch that plan again, we have the ability to do that. Everything from the initial, hi, how you doing? My name's Mark Lewis, to I'm going to do your payroll submissions for the plan going forward, right? So we've seen a lot of that in the TPA world expand. There's really a lot of different versions, flavors of it across the business. There's very light versions of that. There's very heavy versions of that. And so that kind of expansion of those services has excelled some growth for us. What I was telling Bill the other day is that, TPA has been pigeonholed really into the small micro plan space. And I don't know how y'all define the small micro plan space. The market will define it as startup to 5 million as a micro plan, and 5 to 50 is typically a small plan. We've seen us go above and beyond that. I think TPAs and some of these ancillary services outside of that can augment a bundled record keeping solution or take over for a bundled record keeping solution has allowed us to get into the upper market via the 50, 75, $100 million plans. And so that is allowed us to, get into those higher end of the market. I'm going to stop right there for a second, see if anybody has any questions, but I just wanted to give you my initial thoughts on where I see the TPA space right now in versus bundled, and see if anybody has any questions.
Mark, thank you for the time. And I got a question for you. Just looking at your website here, y'all spell out kind of 4 different service models from bare bones all the way up to the 316. I think y'all call it the chauffeur model, which is awesome. You mentioned you feel like more sponsors are going the 316 route. For us as advisors, that's a huge win when a sponsor wants that, right? But sometimes it feels, it feels like a lot to pitch them on 316 because it is more expensive. And how would you guide us to coach sponsors towards more service from the TPA?
Yes. Great question, Luke. I'll tell you that, like I said, I think there's different versions of that 316. We carry a very heavy version with that chauffeur model. And again, guys, I didn't want to jump on this call to like give you a paid advertisement or non-paid advertisement from App Retirement. We've built some things that are, I think, very similar in the industry that you guys can associate with. On the chauffeur level, I learned at an early stage in my TPA career that, the way to sell 316 is to position it as time, money, and resources, right? And when I say resources, I'm really talking about people. The way that I've sold maybe some of the larger cases in the 316 is, plan sponsor, I need you to evaluate how much is it going to cost you on an annual basis to run this plan, right? And maybe it's minimal, maybe it's $3,000, right? For the people that you're allocating to run this plan. But let me put it in a little different perspective for you. If you could take that person's time and allocate it to other things within inside the organization, such as HR functions, time and labor, doing the things that a normal HR or payroll representative would be, is that more valuable than $3,000 to you, right? So it's a balancing act about, yes, is it more expensive? Yes. Is there more time and effort involved? Yes. Are there more requirements to get it kind of set up on the front end? Yes. In the long run, does that equate to value to you as a plan sponsor? And a lot of times the answer is yes. Like, if I can take Annie out of doing this plan stuff, right, for someone that's paying on a weekly basis and having to allocate contributions and all these things, is it valuable enough for me to allocate her to something else with inside the organization? And the answer is a lot of times yes. Especially, I'll tell you, Luke, it's when 316 kind of was getting really rolled out to the marketplace, we saw this really surge in sponsors that wanted to have it at this 0 to 25 participant level range. And it's because they didn't have an HR person, right? The owner was doing all that, right? And then we saw this kind of gap. Like, then the organization or the company or the sponsor got big enough that they had the personnel, they had an HR department, they had an outsourced payroll provider that was doing it for them, kind of 0, that 25 to 150 participant range. And then we saw it really pick up, right? Because then it became an overriding value to them to get some of those people allocated elsewhere inside the company. So just a different perspective. I think it depends on the size of the client about how you position it. But I think that time, money, and resources is how I've been able to how we've been able to bring some clients onto it, and pretty successful at it, to tell you the truth. I will tell you that a lot has changed on the back end with these plans, with 316 services, because of the checkpoints that we do, right? And I think that's across any 316 provider. There is so much data in a payroll file feed today that it is really at the heart of the 316 administration services service. There are so many checks that are made out of that payroll file. And we still have 316 clients that are doing, that are using some really archaic methods, and there's still a lot of lift to get to that point. But we've seen the market move slowly to this integrated payroll, where they're hiring a payroll provider and they can provide that to the record keeper and or us for the 316 services. So a lot of moving parts, but I think from all y'all's guys' standpoint, I think if you position it that if there's enough value here, is it worth that person, or is it worth that time, or is it worth the money to spend on a service like that?
Mark,
can I?
Oh, go ahead, Nate.
I was just gonna respectfully maybe disagree or push back.
Yeah.
I'll be the provocateur here.
Yeah.
So in my experience, most plan sponsors don't care about 316 from a liability standpoint. They care about the services that are often packaged under a 316 model. And what we're starting to see is more and more record keepers be able to take on many of those pain points, right? Notice delivery, force outs, like we can all name them, approving distributions, transactions, things like that. So I guess talk us through how you view the TPA model maybe evolving in sort of this. It used to be TPA was very much an extension of the HR team, or it was a replacement to a non-existent HR team. Now it feels like maybe you're a little bit more involved on like the more complex plan design, compliance type, more of like a consultative type approach, which 316 I guess could fall under that. Although when you review 316 contracts, there's always a million ways for the 316 to get out of it. So I don't really see the shift in liability on that side, but I don't know. I'd be curious, A, do you agree that you feel like record keepers are able to take on some of those 316 services, albeit not being a true 316? And then B, do you see the TPA role evolving into more of that consultative compliance expert and plan design expert?
I do. No, I appreciate the kickback, Nate, and I agree with you to a degree. I'll tell you that, I presented on a $4 million plan on Monday. And they don't have that many participants, and they don't know what they don't know, right? And they don't know it until they miss a payroll contribution, or they have to make up for, lost deferrals, right? And so I agree with you that the record keepers have picked up these added capabilities to do loans, and some of them have done a great job integrating the back end on the payroll side of the equation, right? But still, I would say at the top of the audit list, and again, they don't know until they run into a problem, are administrative functions, right? Missed deferrals, late contributions, all the things that are administratively fixable, right? To your point, I agree with you that the record keepers have picked those pieces up. From a TPA standpoint, part of my sales, sales pitch for albeit, is that we do take a very consultative role today, right? We want to fix your problems, and you may not know that you have problems, which is why they don't believe that a lot of them don't believe that they have any fiduciary liability when it comes to that plan. And 316 is just kind of a pass through, and I can do these things. We've taken it a step further. Not only are we going to fix your problems, and we're going to address problems that you may have that you don't know about, but we're also going to make you better, right? We're going to make sure that the plan is built and constructed for what you built it 5, 7, 10 years ago. The plan I referenced that I presented to on Monday was, they hadn't done a due diligence or a plan review on that plan for the 8 years that they've had it at ADP, right? That's a problem in itself. Like most plan sponsors are going out they're going out about every 3 years, as y'all know, to do at least the due diligence on price, not to mention what they're doing from a plan design standpoint, right? So if I can show them, here's what you got, here's what the SBS rep at ADP set up for you 8 years ago, and here's the side-by-side comparison about what you could have and what's evolved in the plan design, it's a win-win for us, and it's a win-win for the advisor, right? They've never done it, so they don't know what they don't know, like I said. So I hope that answered your question. There's been on the back end of this, with the major payroll providers that are hooking up on the back end with a lot of the major record keepers. I think there's still some gaps with some of them. And we're talking about large payroll providers too, right? So I think there's certain folks that have grasped onto the 316 piece and are willing to commit the resources to accommodate that integration link, and others that still view it in the old school way of mindset, fortunately.
Nate, I'm earmarking you as a provocateur. So
yeah, that's great.
That was good. That was solid. Just to backtrack a little bit with 316 and to Luke's question of, how can I position this? Because it's viewed as a win, right? If I could get a 316 adopted by a plan sponsor. So you said cost, resources, time, right? But what about, I noticed what you didn't say, which was fiduciary, risk, right? So I've always pictured it as you go to Annie in your example, the plan administrator, and she can offload that fiduciary risk. Obviously, she's a fiduciary in selecting that capacity, but I noticed that you didn't bring something like that up. Are my thoughts off base? Is it something that is brought up in that conversation? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I know that everybody on this call realizes that when we talk about fiduciary, when it comes to the plan, really, there's two sides of that, right? I mean, there's the administrative functionality that I'm talking about, and then there's the investment piece, right? And for the large majority of, I would say 99.9% of the TPAs that are engaged in 316 business, they're not stepping over into the 402 capacity. And there's really only a handful of guys out there that will do that will take on this 402 role within inside the plan to hire and fire service providers, right? Be it they can hire and fire you, they can hire and fire me, they can hire and fire the record keeper, right? We're not going to step over in that line, because we know at the end of the day, advisors who are doing this business, who are in the business, don't want the sponsor trying to become an expert in determining who they should hire or fire from that standpoint. And that's really for you guys to quarterback and do from a relationship management standpoint, right?
You're going to see that with PPPs though these days, right?
You are, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So in the PEP world, which we haven't fully got into PEP, we just built a PEP for a really small select group of block of clients that we got. And we are functioning as the PPP on that plan. But it's a like I said, very small group, very small block of business. And I think you'll continue to see that across some of the TPA providers that need to do that for purposes of retention more than anything. That we need to help specific advisors with a block of clients move into that scenario. We're still not sold. We're still not sold that the participant in the PEP world is going to benefit long term from those scenarios. We know that the plans are being sold on an audit basis, and we know that there is a story to be told there. We just don't know if the individual participant is going to benefit long term from some of those scenarios. So yeah, it's interesting. We'll see how it evolves. We are entertaining, some of those conversations across the country where it makes sense. So, but I think back to your point though, Bill, about fiduciary liability when it comes to so when I mentioned like there's a lot of light versions out there of 316, and then there's heavy versions like we're offering. I think you got to really kind of peel back the onion and determine how much liability is this 316 provider really taking on. When I say heavy version, I'm putting my name on the plan document. I'm the name plan administrator in that plan. I'm signing the record keeping agreements for that plan. I'm signing the 5,500 all out full, taking full responsibility for the administrative function of that plan.
Making Annie a lot less stressed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We took over, it's funny you mentioned that. We took over about a $40 million plan down in San Antonio late last year, and we brought them on as a 316 client. And they had the front desk receptionist girl signing the 5,500 at the end of the day. I'm like, those kind of red flags that are thrown in the air. And like, she doesn't, again, back to, I keep using this, to Nate's comment and Luke's, like, they don't know what they don't know. And she's signing some document that she doesn't know what she's putting herself into in the first place. Right?
Yeah. Just like the one thing that like hit me like a ton of bricks when I was first cutting my teeth is when you sign that, you have unlimited personal liability.
Yeah.
Like poor front desk lady. Okay.
Yeah. I know. I want to keep my job. I don't know if I should be signing this 5,500 or not. Right. So.
Mark, I had a question. You initially mentioned like the increase of your closing ratio if a TPA is brought in for advisors. What sort of questions are you asking on those meetings, and what are you trying to kind of nail down to kind of figure out how you can be a consultant in that role rather than just try to close a deal?
Yeah, so great question. I think it starts with the plan design conversation more than anything. How long has it been since you did a formal plan design review? I mean, everybody's always talking about taking the plan out to market and doing an RFP and going to get new pricing for the plan. They're never talking about plan design when it comes to have you did a side-by-side comparison of that plan. And not that you guys need to become experts in whether or not they, what the difference is between lapse time versus equivalency. At the end of the day, most plan sponsors have not done that. And when you present that to them and create it as a value add, it creates a big feather in your cap as well as us to have that formal plan design done with them. Right. Ultimately, the other thing is that, I'm asking the questions about what the real purpose of this plan is. And I think that depends a lot on a lot of different variables about the size of the, how many participants, how many employees you have versus participants. What other people, the biggest question I get nowadays is, what's my competitor down the street doing? Right. Like, what are they doing? What are they offering? What's, XYZ concrete company offering versus ABC concrete company? And, one of the resources that I know is out there, and you guys may have used it before, but Plan Sponsor creates it's a pretty expensive library, but it's an industry plan sponsor report. It tells you like down to the base, like really down to the nitty and the gritty on design, what companies are offering. And it's pretty up to date. Like they got 23 out at this point. And so you can take and show that to them. A number of the IO providers offer it. None of the record keepers subscribe to it. I can get you a couple of contacts if you guys have never seen those, but they've moved plans. I'll tell you this, like to go in and show like in this size in your industry, these people are offering this discretionary match percentage in not only in your industry, but in similar industries, right? That goes a long way with folks. It creates some credibility when you start to show them not only industry specifics, but down to their scope and size of the company they are. Right. So those are a couple of things that I'm doing on the front end. Another thing that we're doing for advisors is we're one of the only firms in the country that subscribes to the RPAG system. And I'm sure some of you know the RPAG system, but as a TPA, a lot of folks ask me, like, why you're a TPA? Why are you subscribing to RPAG? And we did it for one of two different reasons. One is we did it for retention. We have obviously some clients that want to see that on an annual basis, that want to get benchmarked or benchmarked on a 3-year basis, and we're able to run those reports for them. The other reason that we did it is for you, the advisor. Well, if we're able to position ourselves as kind of this middleman broker for that system and or any kind of benchmarking, it prevents you having to field 5 different calls from wholesalers, right? To go get proposals or go get pricing or capabilities. We function as the middleman between your record keeping wholesalers, which I know you guys obviously have great relationships with, but it allows us to be the buffer so that when that plan, if that plan does and when makes a move, you don't necessarily have to give 5 different calls to those guys saying, hey, you didn't get the plan, right? They come back to us. We're running those anonymously and allows us to really kind of go out and get benchmarking for you and be that buffer, right? So a couple of ways we're creating value when it comes to on the front end. I know maybe that doesn't answer your full question, Sam, but some of those some of those kind of open plan design questions that we're asking on the front end is really helping us win plans when it comes to design piece. We really haven't gone into this, but there's been an explosion, obviously, in the defined benefit cash balance world. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that space. We're doing a lot of that business right now, to tell you the truth. The ability to retroact a plan has fueled that growth. We're seeing a growth rate in the business of about 20 to 25% year over year in that business. And, 401k plan business is probably going at 3 to 4% right now. So the explosion of those plans has been phenomenal. It's created a lot of value for actuaries and their salaries these days, to tell you the truth, because they become wanted men pretty quick. But they are driving revenue for advisors. They are driving assets under management for y'all. And we continue to pick up that business to be able to do the cross-testing capabilities with the 401k plan that go along with those plans. So seeing a big growth area in that sector.
Yeah, I would support basically what Mark just said. Sam, to your question, where we're seeing a ton of successes is when you go into a conversation and you consult instead of just present. Most of your plan sponsors, they love to see those plan sponsor reports. As noted, if you go to one of your DCIO partners, usually most of them have them. Invesco has it, American Century, etc. Just ask them for a copy, and they'll ask you what sector exactly you need. So you can say, well, it's a dental office here. They can give you the, whatever the specifics are and get you dialed in. But anytime you go in there and you have plan design discussions, consulting, talk about cash balance plans, talk about your non-qual deferred comp plans, anything that you can do to show them how to retain talent and things like that, especially since COVID, that's been a huge discussion. Anytime we've got into a presentation is they want to talk about how to keep their employees, how to incentivize people, things like that. And so that's where a lot of those discussions go into. So if you guys aren't talking about cash balance plans or non-qual, make sure you guys are doing that because those are huge discussion starters. Yeah, and anytime you go in with a TPA partner, I love going unbundled because you can show some serious expertise when you bring in the right partner. Not even just the 316 side of it, but just talking about fiduciary governance and all the things that they actually should be doing as a plan sponsor. I mean, most of them have no idea what they're doing or have any idea the extent of the list of things that they should be looking at and documenting. So anytime you can have an expert like a TPA come in, man, it's powerful.
Checks in the mail, Kyle. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Mark.
I wanted to ask about I think Mark, I saw you used to work at Future Plan. I think there's been a ton of consolidation in the TPA world. I have one plan where Future Plan had bought the small TPA that was on the plan before. That plan was unhappy with Future Plan through the transition, and they were getting bad service essentially as part of the transition. So we brought in another TPA that we had worked with in the past. That TPA then got bought by American Trust. And we're kind of back in the same place now, right? With just kind of this, a lot of turnover with the staff of the TPA and a lack of response to emails and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So what have you seen on that? I mean, do you expect that trend to continue? And then number two, I believe you guys are like a completely independent TPA, and how does that service model or business model really differ from working with one of these kind of large aggregator TPA firms?
I'm glad you brought that up, Patrick. Good question. Obviously, I could throw a lot of mud in this meeting on my competitors, but I'm not. One of the things that we're obviously
Okay with it if you do.
yeah, a lot of the value that we're putting on the MAP retirement model is that we're not PE backed, right? We're not venture capitalist backed. And I think it goes a long way when we give our initial story to a sponsor and advisor like y'all, that we're not being dictated by some larger entity that's controlling maybe a corporate world up top and the direction of what that TPA or aggregator is going to do going forward. And that goes a long way because we are seeing, when I was talking about like the flipping of these service consultants or administrators on the back end, it's been largely because of some of the stranglehold that some of these private equity and VC capitalists have put on these organizations because they want to juice them and get their return of investment out of those organizations as quickly as possible, right? And so I think you get, if you're a plan sponsor and you, like in this particular situation, you're kind of in this kind of loop, unless you find somebody who's not in that private equity venture capitalist world. What we saw was, and I was a little bit privy to maybe, some of the buying and acquisition that happened, I would say probably even all the way up to the middle of last year. And then it kind of slowed down. I think with the interest rate environment, people weren't able to borrow money as cheap as they were. And so we haven't seen as much in the acquisition space. Future Plans kind of slowed their roll. They went out and they paid way over market for a lot of those firms. And I think they're feeling the effects of that on the back end of it, especially with some of the tightening costs that they've got to backfill some of these folks. And then, they're having to assume some of the, still trying to assume some of these acquisition costs that they paid way over value for. But maybe back to your point though, you get caught in that loop, right? It's a frustrating loop because you get kind of tossed around with people inside those TPA organizations. And lo and behold, before you know it, they've had 5 different administrators, right? So it's important, I think, to find a firm that you can put a plan with that is going to be, that's not going to get active in that. Everybody can be bought at some point. If the check is big enough, at the end of the day, everybody can be bought. I don't think any of us on this phone can prevent that. But knowing that you're going to be put with a firm that's going to be there for the long term, I'll tell you that Bob, Chad, and Matt, who are the principals of the firm, they're the same age as y'all. They got a long-term stance from a TPA organization standpoint. They're in it for a really long time. They got young kids. Some of them got kids in college. They got things to pay for, and they're not going to be bailing out of this solution that they've vested so much into. And I think that story is important to hear on the front end, that you're with a firm that's going to be in there for the long term, right? Because that's ultimately how I think the TPA model has grown over the years, is that the experienced, seasoned administrator is what drives that business at the end of the day, right? So I know we've taken over a lot of Future Plan business, obviously, because they've had some revolving doors when it comes to administrators over there. And I think there's a couple of other aggregators out there, be it, the Definities of the world, where it's been frustrating for clients. And those are the plans we're picking up.
Yeah, I can see a parallel with record keepers and M&A right now.
Yep.
One of the themes that we discuss at our conferences, and I'm hearing, is, it's really important to pick your partners. Because for me, what I'm seeing with like Future Plan, for example, there's no workforce that's rushing towards the TPA market. And a lot of these TPA folks are a little bit older. And we're seeing a lot of big, dumb private equity money that's going in and offering big paydays. And then you've just given someone who's close to retirement a big paycheck for their life's work. And to your point, Mark, people are rushing to backfill it. So we saw the same with record keepers, either digesting others, but with talent moving. But with that, I think the central theme that's over it, when I talk to other advisors, is be very careful when it comes to picking your partners. Maybe they wrapped all this stuff together, but they really just put a bunch of cats into one bag, right? So, that resonates with me. And I see a parallel with that with record keeping, and it's being very cautious about picking your partner.
Yeah, perfect example of that is QBI on the West Coast. I don't know how many of you are on the West Coast, but QBI was a acquisition of Future Plan, and they had built a really solid business off that, really VIP white glove treatment when it came to clients. And Greg had built that business, and unfortunately, Greg died a couple years ago, and that VIP kind of special touch lost its luster when it went to Future Plan, and now, I think there's a lot of TPAs in Southern California that blood gets in the water pretty quick in a territory like that, and business kind of scatters because those clients are used to that white glove treatment. If they don't get it, they're going to go somewhere else at the end of the day. Right? I got a quick question for everybody. I came from a couple firms. I came up in the businesses, TPAs have built their business models on being and having the ability to TPA revenue share with record keepers. It is what kept the lights on for a lot of years for a lot of TPA firms. We've seen a slow transition. I have kind of grown up that I'm going to not really base our business on that. And I'm telling my sales team that if we have the ability to offset our administrative expenses with TPA revenue sharing, we're going to do it. And we're going to do it as to the hilt that we can, and meaning that, the insurance-based companies of the world that pay that to this day are still paying it, and they're paying it at pretty high rates in some cases because they're so hungry for distribution. I guess how many of you position that with a TPA firm or the TPA firms that you're using, that, hey, this TPA firm has the ability to offset this TPA allowance or installation credit that's coming from the record keeping partners? How valuable is that to y'all? And whoever wants to kind of chime in, I'm more than happy to
I
hear.
mean, I'm kind of 50-50 on it. So like some of our clients that like a little bit more of the transparency side of things will do direct invoicing. So in that way they know exactly the true cost of it.
Yeah.
If we've got some where they just built it into the revenue share credits, things like that, we'll go down that route. But generally speaking, I'd say, 8 out of 10 times we're going to go probably that direct invoicing, so they know exactly the true cost of what they're paying for those TPA costs.
Yeah. And that's what I see a lot of. And typically I'm talking when we get into plans that it makes sense. And it's the typical benchmark is about $3 million and above. I would say that it really makes sense from a TPA to start offsetting expenses from that standpoint. But that's good to know. We've seen a little bit of movement towards the more active use of PEA accounts as planned expense accounts, to direct bill TPAs for expenses. We see that, and to their credit, record keepers have kind of embraced that and brought kind of that service level up on the pair accounts and the PA accounts and those ERISA budget accounts up to par with what the market's demanding. So we have seen a little bit of movement in that space to really, in true transparency and disclosure in this world, movement to get the TPA paid that way. So that's good to know. Good to know.
I'll follow suit with Kyle there. It's kind of like 50-50, depending on the client, depending on the transparency of fees, depending on the record keeper. Obviously, there's a variety of different variables involved, but I would say, and I'm kind of one of those where I've kind of fallen into Nate's shoes of like, I'll be the person that's gonna maybe back up and say, I look at a client and say, okay, where is a TPA where do I need them the most? And I'm hearing a couple of things you're saying. I'm almost seeing a cross or overlap in what I'm doing as well. So my question to you is, I'm sorry, I'm kind of deviating from the fee kind of question, but what type of advisors are you working with where you complement each other versus like, I go in and talk about plan design and all this stuff and fiduciary liability, and all of a sudden now if you're coming in and doing the same thing or doing a benchmark, we already have it planned for the next month, right?
Yeah.
How does that work versus you know, because I'm coming in, I'm seeing clients actually fire TPAs because of the I swear that's the conversation. Hey, I don't like my TPA, I don't like my TPA, I don't like my TPA, what can we do? So I'm seeing more and more bundle work just because unfortunately the TPAs out west, for whatever reason, just don't care. So I don't know if that's just
unfortunate to
the
hear,
West Coast
Mason.
thing, but it's like I swear that's the main conversation of, hey, any headaches involved? Yeah, TPA, man, I just can't stand them. What can we do? So you know, a lot to unfold there, but I'm seeing where you're overlapping a lot of what I'm doing when I meet with the plan sponsor, you know, semi-annually.
Yeah, I think it depends on the quality, obviously, and the service model of the TPA, especially in your case, and a lot of you on this call. A lot of these things I'm talking about from a design standpoint, you guys are already doing in a lot of cases, right? So I have to be kind of this superpower that you bring in to say, this is the stable TPA environment or stable TPA firm that we use and we like to use, or that we recommend. That one is going to pick up the phone, and or two is going to answer an email, right? I see, you know, a lot of these things that we run into on a daily basis, and I tell some of our administrators, and when we do run into problems, pick up the phone. A lot of problems can be resolved with one phone call, right? Everybody seems to want to digitally respond these days. They want to send an email, and nobody ever sees it or ever checks their email, and it never gets resolved. And that's how problems compound themselves. So not to go kind of on a tangent, Mason, but to your point, we understand the value that advisors like y'all on this call bring. We want to be able to supplement that and offer we want to offer a really sturdy service model that's going to answer the questions that can't be answered by you or are not resolved. The other thing I'll tell you that is relevant right now, to tell you the truth, is there's still a lot of TPAs operating that run this archaic census gathering process at the end of the year for plan sponsors.
Yes.
It is the most exhausting thing for a plan sponsor to go through this process with somebody who, one, maybe doesn't know what they're doing, or two, doesn't have an efficient process to gather the information at the end of the year, right? And so I not to go back to 316, but one of the reasons some of these plan sponsors have incorporated 316 is that if we are gathering the payroll file, we're gathering all these data points throughout the year, we're tracking their contributions. At the end of the year, I only have two questions for them. Have you sold the business, or has ownership changed? And they don't have a census process because I've already collected all the information throughout the year. So in some cases that has been one of the reasons they've moved to a 316 model, but still, like, not to belabor this, but still to this day, TPAs lose business because of that year-end process.
That's so true. That is my main problem. That you hit the nail right on the head. That is what my two local TPAs still do that.
Yeah.
So that is the main problem.
They're like, do I really have to fill out this spreadsheet? Do I really have to go through this process? If it's not efficient for them, they hate it, right?
Yep.
If it's not the format that they want to do it in, they hate it, right? So I get it. We still got to go through the process. We still got to ask the questions. One of the things that we've incorporated is kind of this year-end interview with the plan sponsor. And it's really more of a touch for us at the administrator level. Listen, I haven't talked to you in 8 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it may be. Just want to touch base with you again. Right? And so we're able to massage that process a little bit, but I'll tell you, some of the older TPAs that are out there still have a really antiquated process when it comes to this census process at the end of the year. And we got a lot of clients, we got a lot of opportunities coming to us because they just went through it, right? It happened at the first of the year, and everybody's like, I gotta get a new TPA. This process is awful, right? So
Mason, to kind of help answer your question too, usually we'll partner with TPAs, even though we do the consulting work on our side. It also shows a level of expertise when you bring in a partner that can complement what you're doing. So when you're having those discussions, of course, and Mark, I'm sure you get a fair share of these, is anytime you've got those problem clients where they're just like, okay, you're a lot of work, you don't have an experienced HR person, you need some help. They're always, a godsend when it comes to having, some resources to help with the year-end compliance stuff, things like that. Otherwise, generally speaking, our TPAs that we work with know how we like to operate, and they'll complement us instead of kind of, competing against us. And at the end of the day, if you're that center influence for your client and you're bringing the people together, I think that's that certainly adds value to what you're doing for them.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. I agree. Like, you got to have that good partnership of like defining that TPA with their correct role, right? Because unfortunately, maybe it's just because of the archaic way of the way they're doing things. They don't understand that, hey, there are advisors out there that specialize in 401k plans, right? They don't maybe understand our role completely to where there is that cohesive feel.
Just to your point, Mason, I think there's a lot of TPA sales guys who are running them through the pipeline, right? They're not taking that consultative role, and they're just another number when it comes to selling a plan. And unfortunately, that's not how they survive in this business. They got to kind of dig in the weeds and get dirty. A couple other things that I think could offer some value to y'all. We have plan sponsors that don't necessarily want or need 316, just want to take a little bit of time off my HR professional or benefits person's hands. Finding a TPA that will just go out and upload the payroll contributions to the Empower website or the Hancock website. Doing independent payroll uploads has been pretty important for a lot of plan sponsors. We didn't realize how important it was going to be or how attractive it was going to be, but there are a few TPA firms out there that do independent payroll uploads for plan sponsors. Takes the time off of those people's hands, kind of gets them maybe a little bit less disengaged with the plan, but it frees up their time, right? The other thing that we've seen a real uptick in is correction work, right? Finding a TPA that will do correction work for a plan sponsor. Some of the stories I have are nightmare stories when it comes to folks that haven't done what they're supposed to do, whether it be missed deferral opportunities, going through the voluntary or self-correction programs, filing 5500s, finding a good TPA partner that will do that and do it efficiently and fast, not 18 months down the road, is I think is a feather in your cap. And I think taking those folks in, because you never know kind of what you're going to walk into when it comes to those situations. We had a guy that hadn't filed 5500 in 6 years, that kind of stuff, how he fell off the radar and didn't get, a huge fine from the IRS is beyond me, but, we corrected it. Finding a good partner that can do that work, I think is very important. Bill, I hope that was helpful.
You might be otherwise engaged.
No,
But that was super helpful, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you for the time, man. This has been great.
Good.
And guys, I don't know. I think Bill may have mentioned.
I agree. Sorry, my kid was
ahead.
like he was freaking out and he went past my time, but I'm glad
Bill picked up the date.
Mark, I heard us rapping. Thank you for joining, and we can pick another topic maybe for next month. Let's discuss it over beers at Napa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or for the most part. But
how many of you, just a quick raise of hands, or I'd speak up. It doesn't really matter. How many of you, use Fidelity as a record keeper? I'm just curious. I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That Fidelity is obviously a big mainstay here. We are, MAP Retirement is part of the TPA Advisory Council over at Fidelity. We've helped them build their newer end product, but it's kind of surprising that obviously Fidelity is really committing a lot of resources. I'm not here to they don't need any more help than what I'm going to give them to build a TPA product, but it's fairly new. And we've seen some of these, kind of evolutions of products from record keepers on the back end. So I was just curious, just because Bill and I are so close to mothership down here. I guess you can call it that. It's a freaking impressive operation over there. So yeah, sorry I cut you off, Bill. Yeah, a different whatever topic I can help with, I'm more than happy to do.
No, I mean, this is just for like next week as we wrap, but we can do it via email and stuff. Sorry, guys, I got frazzled in the end. He was freaking out. You dads know the program, but yeah, you know what? Let me I just want to say thanks again, Mark, for jumping on, especially with like on the short notice. And with that, I'm gonna bounce off. I'll toss it to you, Luke, to wrap. But thanks, guys, and for those at Napa, let's exchange contact info and we'll get together.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, fellas. Bill may have mentioned this, but I am actually leaving the 401k industry in May. I'm going to a role in a family office. So this is a sort of sayonara. I'm going to be on the next meeting, and Bill's going to kind of transition leadership and continue this thing going. I hope that it's been awesome. I really enjoyed getting to know you guys and hope it continues. I'd say as far as next month goes, if you've got topics you're interested in, just send them in the group email and we'll just pick one at random that we haven't covered yet. But thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
See
Thanks,
y'all.
Mark. Thanks, Luke.